Like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you're ready to step inside a place even New York pretends not to see. Because once these gates close behind you, there's no rewind, no mercy, and no silence. The call came in just before dawn, when Rikers Island looks almost peaceful from the outside. A gray river, cold wind, the skyline glowing faintly in the distance. But inside the jail, peace is a foreign concept. A corrections officer had found an inmate collapsed on the concrete floor of a housing unit that was supposed to be under constant watch. No alarms were triggered. No witnesses were willing to speak. Just a body, cooling fast, beneath flickering fluorescent lights. By the time NYPD detectives crossed the bridge onto the island, the unit had already been scrubbed clean. Too clean. The sharp smell of bleach burned the air, and the floor shined as if a crime had never happened there. But everyone knew better. At Rikers, violence doesn't just explode. It seeps, it waits, and it strikes when no one is looking. The victim was 22-year-old Marcus Reed, locked up on a nonviolent charge, still waiting for his trial date. He'd been on the island for less than 4 months. He had no major disciplinary history and no known enemies. At least, none that were on paper. The medical examiner's initial report didn't scream riot or gang war. It whispered something far worse. Targeted, deliberate, and quiet. Detective Elena Morales had worked Rikers cases before. Most cops hated them. They were too messy, too political, with too many people looking the other way. As she walked the tier, she immediately noticed something was off. Cameras that should have captured every angle were pointed just slightly wrong, creating perfect blind spots. A guard station log showed a 15-minute gap in entries, dismissed as a simple clerical error. On Rikers Island, errors weren't mistakes, they were currency. Morales met her partner, Detective Tom Gallagher, by a cell door that was dented inward, as if someone had been slammed against it with incredible force. Inside, Marcus Reed's bunk was neatly made. His few personal items were gone. No photos, no letters, no commissary snacks. It was like someone had tried to erase him before he was even pronounced dead. From behind their bars, inmates watched silently, their eyes sharp but their faces blank masks. When Morales started asking questions, the responses came back rehearsed, almost robotic. Didn't see nothing. Was asleep. Asked the guards. Fear hung in the air, thicker than the stench of disinfectant. Snitching on Rikers wasn't just dangerous, it was a death sentence. The first crack in the wall of silence came from a very unlikely source. A veteran corrections officer, his face etched with years of stress, pulled Morales aside, his voice barely a whisper. "That kid was marked," he said, his eyes darting around nervously. "Not by inmates. By the system." Before Morales could press him for more, the officer stepped back, suddenly hyper-aware of the cameras he knew were watching them. He was gone. Digging into Reed's intake file only revealed more inconsistencies. His housing assignment had been changed 3 times in just 2 weeks, bouncing him between units controlled by rival crews. A clear recipe for disaster. There was no explanation for these moves, no approval signatures on the paperwork. There were only digital footprints leading to dead ends. Gallagher noticed something else that sent a chill down his spine. Reed had officially requested to be put in protective custody just days before his death. The request was denied, with no reason given, no comment left. Just denied. As the day wore on, pressure started coming from above. The warden wanted the case wrapped up, and fast. Inmate-on-inmate violence, he stated flatly during a brief call. Tragic, but routine. Morales had heard that phrase too many times before. It was the official code for "make this disappear." Then they discovered the missing witness. Another inmate, Jamal Price, had reportedly been seen talking with Reed on the night he died. But Price was gone. He'd been transferred off the island just hours before the detectives even arrived. There was no forwarding location in the system, no paperwork trail. He had simply vanished. Frustrated but undeterred, Morales decided to push deeper. She pulled the surveillance backups from a secondary server that someone had forgotten to wipe clean. What she found wasn't a fight. It wasn't chaos. It was order. A perfectly coordinated, controlled blackout of specific cameras. Doors unlocking when they should have been sealed. Doors locking when they should have been open. And then, the most damning image of all, a figure entering Reed's unit wearing a corrections uniform that didn't belong to anyone scheduled to be on duty that night. The deeper they looked, the clearer the horrifying picture became. Reed hadn't just been killed in a random act of jailhouse violence. He'd been silenced. Late that night, Morales stood alone in the dusty records room, flipping through years of archived incident reports. Names started to repeat. Patterns began to emerge. Inmates who complained about conditions. Inmates who filed official grievances. Inmates who asked too many questions about missing commissary funds, or about favors being exchanged between certain guards and gang leaders. They all had one thing in common. Something bad happened to them shortly after. And then she found it. A sealed evidence envelope, misfiled under an old, unrelated case number. Inside was a handwritten note, confiscated from Marcus Reed during his intake process. It was never logged into evidence, never returned to him. 3 words, written shakily but clearly. They run it. In that moment, Morales felt the full, suffocating weight of the island settle on her chest. This wasn't a single murder. It was a message, a warning to anyone else who dared to speak up. And when investigators finally unlocked the storage locker that had been assigned to Reed, the one officially listed as empty in the facility's records, what they found inside proved that Marcus Reed hadn't just known too much. He had kept proof, and someone on Rikers Island had killed him to make sure that, at first glance, the contents of the locker seemed almost insignificant. A folded grievance form, a cheap prepaid phone, a smudged list of names. But in a place like Rikers Island, paper can be more dangerous than any weapon. Officer Morales knew at the second she saw the handwriting. This wasn't just paranoia. This was documentation. The grievance form detailed a chilling pattern. Guards systematically redirecting inmates to specific housing units. Commissary funds mysteriously vanishing. Charges being quietly upgraded after so-called confrontations with staff. The inmate, Marcus Reed, had been incredibly methodical. He wrote down dates, badge numbers, even the exact locations. He'd even noted every time a security camera malfunctioned. When Morales powered on the cheap phone, she found a series of recorded voice memos. It was Reed, whispering late at night, his voice filled with a careful, controlled fear. He named officers. He named inmate enforcers. He described a horrifying system where violence was outsourced and discipline was profitable. A machine built on control and fear. But before Morales could properly log the evidence, internal affairs descended. The locker was sealed shut. The phone was confiscated, they said, for review. Morales was ordered off the island immediately, pending reassignment. Her partner, Gallagher, wasn't. He was told to stay close, to keep things calm. And in that moment, Morales understood the real danger wasn't the inmates. It was the isolation. 2 days later, another inmate, Jamal Price, resurfaced. Or rather, his body did. He was found in a holding cell at a completely different facility. The official ruling? Suicide. There was no note. No camera footage of the event. Just the same quiet, chilling efficiency she'd seen before. Morales watched the press conference from her apartment, her fists clenched tight as officials offered condolences and promised transparency. She'd heard all those empty words before. The machine knew exactly how to protect itself. That night, Gallagher called, his voice tense and low. He'd made a copy of Marcus Reed's list before IA took the originals. And the names on that list led upward. Way upward. Supervisors, private contractors, even a transport company tied to inmate transfers. Money was being systematically siphoned out of commissary accounts and funneled back in through shell companies. The violence wasn't random at all. It was enforcement, a tool to keep the system running. Then, Gallagher stopped answering his phone. By the next morning, he was listed as injured in an accidental fall on Rikers grounds. He was alive, but sedated and completely unreachable. The message was crystal clear now. Stop digging, or you'll disappear too. But Morales didn't stop. Instead, she leaked. She found a trusted journalist who had covered jail corruption years earlier and handed over every copy she had. The story broke slowly at first, filled with cautious language and unnamed sources. But then, former inmates started coming forward. Then their families. Then a retired officer, who had stayed silent for over a decade, finally broke his silence. The pattern was undeniable. Rikers wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as it was designed to, for the benefit of those who controlled it from the shadows. Public pressure mounted until it was a tidal wave. Federal investigators finally arrived. Raids followed. Several officers were arrested, and many others were placed on leave. The warden resigned. issuing a carefully worded statement. And, of course, officials promised reform, oversight, and change. Morales watched it all unfold with a hollow feeling in her gut. She'd seen these so-called reforms before. They came and went like the seasons. Months later, the case of Marcus Reed was officially closed. The cause of death was finally changed to homicide. But responsibility? Under investigation. No convictions were ever tied directly to his murder. No one even said his name on the news anymore. Morales visited the island one last time to retrieve the few personal effects that were authorized for return to Reed's family. As she walked past the same housing unit where it all started, now freshly painted and eerily quiet, she noticed something. Carved faintly into the metal frame near a bunk were 3 words, in a different handwriting. They still run it. Rikers Island remained open. Inmates still crossed that bridge every single day. Cameras still glitched. Logbooks still showed gaps in the records. The violence continued, just quieter now, harder to trace. The system adapted, just like it always did. Marcus Reed never made it to trial. His charges were dropped after his death. His evidence sparked investigations, hearings, and screaming headlines. But the machine that crushed him survived. Morales kept his grievance form, framed in her office. A constant, grim reminder of the cost of truth in a place designed to bury it forever. Because the most terrifying thing about a place like Rikers isn't the violence you can see. It's the violence that has learned how not to leave a mark. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for what's coming next. Stay alert. Stay curious. And don't forget to subscribe, because some truths only surface when someone refuses to look away.